Good evening and welcome to The Verdict. It's our coverage, our continuing coverage of all things general elections, even though it's been modified now. I'm Chamberlain Oso.
And I'm Kayode Alayode. As the elections have been modified, so our programs and everything coming in between have been modified. You're welcome.
So instead of having us 2-4-7, we'll be having breaks just in between, just to ensure that we follow the process, cover it as much as we can, and bring you just about every information concerning the postponement to when we get back on track again. Welcome, I'm Gimbo Umar.
Actually, you have nothing to worry about because we will get you all the information that you require in this election. So the chairman of INEC has been speaking about why they had to reschedule the elections. We do know that not a lot of people were happy with that rescheduling owing to the kind of commitment that they made previously about it. And the chairman has explained, but whether or not that explanation went down well with a lot of people, it's a different kettle of fish entirely.
Well, absolutely. I'm more particularly worried about the social impact of that postponement. Even though the excuses, because they still remain in the realms of excuses, they sounded intelligent, they sounded reasonable, but the impacts remain the same. People have dates that they've scheduled for things to go on. Some had moved their events 1 week ahead of the elections. What happens?
I guess they'll have to move it again.
They have to move it again. Monies have to be spent, and several other things. Parties are affected, you know. The
Traders Association is already pegging the figure at 140 billion naira that is lost as a result of the postponement of the elections. So it's huge, people. It has happened in 2015 when elections were postponed for about 6 weeks.
Yeah.
It happened in 2011. I think it was for about 48 hours or that much. And it's happening here again. So it's a source of concern. I'm just afraid that this should not be crippling into the election cycle for us. You know, that anytime we're having elections, on election year, we get to that point where something happens. The last time it was because of security concerns when the NSA came out to say that it cannot guarantee the safety of people, especially the court members, during the elections, and that led to the postponement of the elections at that time. Now it's as a result of logistics. INEC says it's not been able to move materials, sensitive and non-sensitive materials, to their designated points, and as a result of that, it had to get back to the drawing table to try to see if those issues can be resolved. I've been on the track. I've been on the field, so I've been following up on this. I had a discussion with Fela Dorotoye of the ANN, and he was practically living that this is happening. But for the greater good, he said that INEC must be able to go above board and try to see that those pitfalls of PVCs that were not collected, how it's supposed to secure its materials just so that it doesn't get into the hands of the bad guys.
Yeah.
Just, you know, INEC should straighten out all of this.
But, you know,
we have a smooth process.
About the PVCs, I think INEC has been clear on that. They say, look, the day since the deadline for the collection of PVCs has elapsed, it remains so. But, you know, just as was highlighted previously, moving forward, since a lot of people are concerned, the politicians themselves inclusive, concerning whether or not we need to keep going this way. But ultimately, we need to also ask ourselves as a country, do we need to keep shutting down the country because we want to do elections, since on more than 1 or 2 occasions now, we've had to reschedule? And that usually costs a lot. So isn't it about time that we put that into key consideration? Do we need to really shut it down?
Yeah.
We have the...
you know, Chamberlain, if you have to go that way, it has to go with some, amendment of the Electoral Act, basically. Well, because if we have to, if we have to get that far, you think of the implications of going completely digital, the system, going electronic. But what INEC was saying was that, okay, some parts of it will be electronic. We cannot have full electronic process, whereby what we can do with is just to transmit results electronically.
Isn't that a different scenario?
Excuse me, Chamber. I think that's what some people find very, very upsetting. We can't hinge it entirely on technology, because countries have been, they've been carrying out elections, and they've been devoid of this kind of embarrassing, and they've been coming repeatedly. And that's why some people say, look, this is a matter of planning. And you remember what the chairman of the APC said. He said, look, if something was going to fail, you didn't need 2 a.m. to find out that it was going to fail. Because election planning and execution is a simply or mostly scientific process.
So
we can,
are we deploying manual process to solve something that should be scientific?
And so we cannot justify, because it's becoming a pattern that we then begin to refer to. It happened in 2011. It happened in 2015. It doesn't happen like that in other countries. So it's simply unjustifiable.
You know, guys, I mean, much as people have a reason, to be angry about all that has happened, but the thing about that is that, well, there are two sides of the coin. So the man who wore the shoe, who wears the shoe, the chairman of INEC, he's given his reasons, which we'll examine. But I think we should just go ahead and just listen to some of the highlights of the interactive session he had with stakeholders, explaining to them why he had to do what he did.
Preparations for the 2019 general elections have been extensively tasking for INEC. It is therefore not unexpected that such a tremendous national mobilization of men and materials will encounter operational challenges, and we have had our own fair share of these challenges. There has been delays in delivering ballot papers and result sheets for the elections, which is not unusual. However, I must emphasize that all ballot papers and result sheets were ready before the elections, despite the very tight legal framework for finalizing nominations of candidates and dealing with the spate of legal challenges that accompany it. In this regard, the Commission has been sued or joined in 640 court cases arising from the nomination of candidates alone. As of today, there are 40 different court orders against the Commission on whether to add or drop candidates. Interestingly, the last order actually arrived yesterday. The net effect of this is that there is usually roughly 1 month window for the Commission to print ballot papers and result sheets and either fly or transport them to several destinations until they finally get to each of the polling units. Unfortunately, in the last 1 week, flights within the country have been adversely affected by bad weather. For instance, 3 days ago, we were unable to deliver materials to some locations due to bad weather. We therefore had to rely on slow-moving, long-haulage vehicles to locations that can be serviced by air, in spite of the fact that we created 5 zonal hubs.
So there you have some of the highlights of what the chairman of INEC said about why the commission had to reschedule the elections. Of course, there's a lot more than what you have just heard now, because he had an interactive session. There were questions, and he responded to them. So to look through, discuss some of these issues, we've got GT Ogunye here with us. He's Channels TV's election consultant. Good to see you again, GT.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here this evening.
Well, you know,
fellow Nigerians.
About this postponement or rescheduling of the elections, as it were, I know that lots of people are angry about it. They've given their reasons why they don't think that he did this. But part of the issues that were also raised is INEC has an election situation room. So they expected to have, I don't know what kind of information sails through or they sieve through on those bases. But from the perspective of those who thought that, fine, even if you had to postpone those elections, it didn't have to come at the time it did. Because if they say there were some politicians who knew that the elections were not going to hold the next day, can we rely on that and say, well, INEC, you should have postponed this a little earlier than you did?
You know, it's not just the postponement of the election that is wrong, in my view. It's also the manner of the postponement. So the two are wrong. And just for people to know, we have form, we have essence. we have style, we have substance. Both are very important. Even merely looking at the decorations at the INEC briefing center, International Conference Center today, I didn't see seriousness.
In what way?
Look, you can roll back the tape. The place was elaborately decorated with lights and all that. That suggests some kind of festivity, some kind of celebration. That shouldn't be. All these things are important.
But purely sentimental. Someone will argue with you too.
No. It's not sentimental. It's important. So what are you showing? What mood are you showing? What mood are you conveying? A mood that is not somber and sober. So it's important because all these things are important because that decoration is not for free. People are spending money there. That's part of 245 billion. And this is very important. It's form, it's style, but it's important because from it, you can then go to the substance and then ask yourself, why do we need to subject ourselves to this kind of ordeal every 4 years?
You do remember, of course, that INEC had a lot of challenges. Fires gutted some of its materials. It's also grappling with the deployment of those sensitive materials to the different points. Logistics was not too good for INEC. Won't you give them a little slack?
Look, the INEC chairman went through all this in his speech. Talked about logistics, challenges and all that. Talked about the fire incident. He indeed mentioned those. But I'm saying that those fires didn't happen at 2 a.m. They didn't happen at 11 a.m. And the media was ahead. The media shouldn't be ahead of it. As far back as 9 hours before that midnight postponement, the media had come out with a strong speculation, quoting internal sources from INEC that INEC was going to postpone. I'm saying that the manner of the postponement does not accord with the dignity of the electorate. The president of the country was in his home state to vote, and other, Nigerians have traveled far and wide and all to cast the ballot. How would the international community treat us? Observers were here. I'm saying that, indeed, it is an aggravating factor that 3 days before the election, INEC didn't know, based on its review, that in 72 hours they will not be able to hold, whereas there was nothing extraordinary that occurred in the last 72 hours preceding the rescheduled election. That's the point I'm making. Not an earthquake, not a sudden war, not something so phenomenal, so extraordinary. I'm saying that it is still about logistics and all that. INEC, 72 hours